Tips to avoid public speaking anxiety. Once again, you should go ahead and open up the document, Tips to Avoid Public Speaking Anxiety, on the class webpage if you haven't already got it open. And what I want to do, I want to start off by talking about the factors that contribute to people feeling anxiety when they speak publicly. I mean, probably the biggest reason where people feel anxious when they're speaking publicly is that they lack experience. They just haven't done it very often. And anything that you try that's new is going to be difficult. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's playing guitar, playing baseball, or speaking publicly. It's just going to be difficult. So that's one of the reasons why, if you listen to the veterans on the team speak, they speak so much more confidently than newer members, because they just have experience at doing it. Oftentimes as well, people, I think, are anxious about speaking publicly because they've had some sort of negative experience earlier in their life. Maybe they said something where people laughed at them, and maybe it's not even their own experience. Maybe what's happened and what they've seen in the past is somebody else get up and go ahead and blow it up, on giving a speech, and it's like, oh my God, I don't want to ever have that happen to me. There are other people who are just afraid of being the center of attention. If you've been on the team for a while, you already know that there are some people who love being the center of attention. But there's some people who are just uncomfortable. They just don't like all the eyes being on them. And they may be confident, they know what they want to say, they feel real good about their understanding of the topic. And then when everybody turns to them, it's like, okay. It's like, oh my God, and you just freeze up. The other part is that people are afraid of being judged. People are just afraid of the idea that everybody's sitting out there and they're going ahead and they're evaluating sort of your worth as a human being, that if somehow you screw up, it's like you are a useless human being. I mean, I get this in classes all the time in my introduction to political science courses. Students who are just afraid to speak up. And when I ask them about it, everybody has this fear that if they say something wrong, people are going to judge them and look at them and think I hate that person. I hate that person's family. Right? I hate everybody related to that person. The people are going to somehow really judge you harshly. And it doesn't work that way. And actually, I'm going to circle back to that when I talk about TAMP, T-A-M-P. And then lastly, and this is, I don't mean to be getting all Dr. Philish on you here, but there's another part, I think, where people fear that they really don't deserve to be listened to. That they don't feel worthy, for lack of a better way of putting it. Who am I to get up there and speak representing Mexico on the issue of immigration? Who am I to stand up and talk to you people? And especially if you're looking around at a conference and you're seeing people who look really smart and really knowledgeable. And I'll be quite honest with you. Sometimes when I'm speaking in front of the faculty, it feels the same way. I get that same concern about who am I to be talking to you guys about whatever the topic happens to be. So there are a number of reasons for people to feel anxious when they're speaking publicly. And it doesn't matter whether they're rational or not rational. It makes no difference. They're just there. They're just there. And so that's what we want to do. We don't want to pretend like they don't exist. We don't want to pretend that they're not there. They're there. And it's normal. It's normal for people to feel anxious. So the question is, what do you do about it? Well, in terms of ways to go ahead and alleviate fear of speaking in public, the first one is the most common sense one. It's probably the least exciting to hear. You know it's coming, and there's nothing I can do to change the fact that it's coming. Practice. Practice, practice, practice. There's the only way to get over this is to just practice it. And I'm not talking about just getting up and doing it. But I'm talking about if you have a speech or a presentation that you're going to be doing, practice it at home. One of the things that I do, and the veterans on the team already know this, one of the things that I do is when I'm giving a speech, I'll go ahead and on the way to school, I'll practice giving the speech. On the way home, I'm in the car, I practice giving the speech. I practice it over and over again. There are times when I'm getting ready to address on the first day of class, I think this semester on the first day of class, because my goal was to go ahead and scare the hell out of people who showed up and make sure that students who really didn't have what it took to be on the Model United Nations team dropped the class. I wanted them to understand how intense this was. that I practiced my speech on exactly what I was going to say, to go ahead and challenge the people who were good. And if you're watching this, that's you. And scare away the people who didn't really have what it took to go ahead and make it on the team. And not because I wanted to be mean to them. Let me be clear. I don't want to be mean to them, but I don't want to put somebody in a position where they're going to fail. And I certainly don't want to put somebody in a position where they're going to go ahead and they're going to do poorly and it's going to affect their academic standing. So you got to practice. The better you know your presentation, the more comfortable you're going to feel. But a lot of times people think that when you're trying to memorize a presentation, getting prepared to practice, that what your goal should be is to memorize your speech word for word. No, you don't want to memorize your speech. What you want to do is you want to memorize the structure of your speech. You want to remember the main points that you want to say. Because when I walk back and forth, when I drive back and forth to school practicing my presentations, I never say the same thing twice. Every once in a while I'll be practicing and I'll think, man, that was a really good line. And I'll keep that and I'll keep saying that one. I'll keep repeating that line over and over again. But sometimes when I say it, it comes out differently. It doesn't always come out exactly the same. And that's okay because it adds a little spontaneity to it. It makes it a little more interesting. If you've ever seen somebody give a speech where they've memorized every single word, unless they are great orators, and that's not true for most people, unless they're great orators, it is just boring. And what it makes it even worse is that they're giving a speech and they go ahead and they're reading it. They're reading it because that is really awful. So practice and just recognize, as I said before, that everyone feels some anxiety when they're doing a presentation. Maybe it's people who are really experienced, they may feel the anxiety when they're just walking up to the podium. Right? Some people may feel that anxiety the first speech that they give at the conference, and then it just sort of melts away. But everybody feels some anxiety. Don't try and make that go away. That is part of the process. Just learn to accept that and use it. As a matter of fact, use it to energize yourself. The third thing to go ahead and you can do to help sort of deal with the fear of speaking in public is to go ahead and know your audience. And this is where this notion of TAMP comes in. I'm sorry. I'm recording in my kitchen. It's an active household. TAMP. TAMP stands for These Are My People. This was a realization that occurred to me a few years back when I was doing a presentation at UCLA. I knew that I was going to be speaking in front of hundreds of people, and that was scary. Some of them were going to be professors, former students. Actually, even some professors from College of the Canyons came. And it was intense. But one of the things that I realized is that everybody there, everybody in the auditorium was rooting for me. Every one of them wanted me to be successful. Maybe there was one person who hated me at UCLA and was like, I hope the guy falls on his face. But for the most part, everybody wanted me to be successful. They wanted me to do well. And I shouldn't feel afraid being in front of them because these people are basically rooting for me to do well. They want me to do well, in part because they like me, that's why they were there, but in part because nobody likes to watch somebody fall apart in front of a group. It makes us uncomfortable to watch somebody standing up there fumbling. I'm sure you've experienced this before, fumbling in a speech, going ahead and really struggling, looking nervous, maybe starting to freeze up. It makes us uncomfortable. When they feel good and they're doing their presentation and they look confident, then we feel better. It's easier to just sit back and enjoy what they have to say. So always keep that in mind. And this is true even at the Model United Nations conferences. Nobody wants to watch somebody do really awfully. They do want to compete with you and they do want to beat you. They want to win an award, but they really don't want to have the uncomfortable feeling of watching you fall apart. The other way to get around feeling anxious when you're speaking publicly is to know what your weaknesses and more importantly, do something about them. Do something about them. So for example, if you have a tendency to speak too fast, then when you write your little bullet points down about what you're going to say, put a little bracket in there just saying slow down and just remind yourself, slow down. If you have a tendency to speak too quietly, when you write your bullet points, just write loud in brackets just to remind yourself to speak up. Know what your weaknesses are, but do something about it. Don't just say like, oh man, I always speed up and I just have to live with that. That's not the case. And then the last thing is know that it looks worse from the inside than from the outside. There are often times when people are nervous and they feel nervous and they think that everybody can see into their soul. They can see how nervous they are. And yet, most of the time, it's not apparent to anyone at all. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a delegate sit back down and go, oh my God, I was so nervous. Could you tell? And I was like, no, I couldn't. Because they projected confidence. Right? That's one of the things we're practicing. They projected confidence. So it always looks worse from the inside than the outside. So never apologize for being nervous. When you get up there to speak, you are the authority figure. You are Mexico, or you are Switzerland, or you are the president of Rhodesia. Whoever you happen to be, that's you, and you're representing that person. You are the expert in that particular field. Don't apologize for feeling nervous, because oftentimes if you do, what you're going to do is you're going to bring to the attention of other delegates the fact that you're nervous when they weren't aware of it ahead of time. These are the things that you can go ahead and do to reduce your anxiety. And then lastly, have the proper mental state. You need to think positive thoughts about yourself. You need to go ahead and understand that you can make a mistake. If you slip up, if you say if you play this video over, you'll see that I said quite a few times, right? When you make a mistake, look around and you will notice that the world has not ended. It is okay to make a mistake. You're going to be in a conference for a really long time. And one mistake here or there isn't going to make any difference. If you're ready, if you're prepared, you're going to do extremely well. And I'm going to stop right now because I feel like I'm giving a presentation in the kitchen. Oh, I am. Later.